want to come on and talk for a few minutes and apologize to everybody that I haven't been here. It's really been a rough April for me. I just went through my depression, my deep depression time again. It comes on about every 2 to 3 months. This time it was really bad. For almost 2.5 weeks, I was spending anywhere from 12 to 14 hours at a time in bed. I'd get up, I'd be up an hour, and I'd be so tired and so sleepy I couldn't even sit up. So I would go back to bed. I wasn't eating, I wasn't drinking. The one thing is I made sure I was taking my medications, that they just didn't seem like they were working at all. This is the first sunny day we've had, seems like in 2 weeks. I have spent so much time in bed, not eating or anything. I've lost 34 pounds. And the doctor's really concerned, especially in 2 weeks. But the one thing I can say is the swelling in my legs completely went down. I mean, they're completely went down. Of course, you know, they'll come back up now, but today's the first day we've had of rain, or no rain in the last couple of weeks. So I decided to go out and get the lawnmower started up and get it going and get the yard mowed. I got on it, started right up. I got one strip mowed and smoke started coming out from under the seats and it just died. It's like, it just died. It not getting any power at all. The battery just went completely dead. So I got one strip mowed and that's all I got done, and now my lawnmower's gone. I have a guy supposed to come if it's not raining tomorrow. He said he'd come by and look at it tomorrow. But starting tomorrow, the thunderstorms come back, and we have heavy thunderstorms and storms for the next 5 days before we get another clear day. But this depression part really hit me. And I got to get myself out of it. I've just got to. I've got the living room, everything in the living room washed, the walls washed, everything pulled out, cleaned behind, washed and put back. But I can't get myself motivated enough to do the rest of the house now. So I don't know when I'm going to be able to do that until I get back in my right mind. But it just hit me this morning that I really haven't been putting out any videos, period, because I've just been in this deep depression about the internet going up and down and up and down, and I just gave up on it for a while. But we had a big thunderstorm yesterday, and I was watching the water pour across my front yard. You know, it took me back to 1969 when I started school, the first year I was in school. We lived in the town of Bentonville, Arkansas. I don't know if you can see how I'm drawing this, but anyway, you come off the main road and there was like a dirt road that went down a couple of miles, and then there was a house that sat on this side, and then the road went on through, and then you had to cross a bridge over it was a creek. It was probably, I don't know, probably 20 feet wide at its low point, and you crossed the bridge, and when you went across the bridge, you went down and went around the corner, but when you come around that corner, you could either go on up the road or turn in a driveway right here, and our house sat right there, and then there, right behind our house, was another creek and another bridge, and you went over that bridge and you went up, and there was one more house up there, and the road ended there, and there was a couple there, probably in their late 40s, early 50s, I'd say, and their last name was Koch. And if you went back around the curve and went up to the house up here, there was a family lived there by their last name was Rice. And I remember a big storm that hit there one night, and I remember standing out. I was probably, I don't know, 7, 8 years old, somewhere in there. I remember standing out, and the when you cross that bridge and start down that dirt road, it was just a kind of like a mountain, and they'd cut right down the middle of it and put the road through it. And from our front porch of our house, when you pulled in our driveway, the porch was here, and when you walked outside, it was just a big mountain right in front of the house. And I remember watching the wind just rock the trees back and forth, and the lightning and the heavy rain. Well, by that morning, the rain and everything was gone. Of course, we didn't have a telephone or anything back then. And our neighbors, Mr. and Mrs. Koch, had a telephone, but we didn't. And my mom was about 7, 8 months pregnant at that time. And the next morning, it had cleared up pretty much. So me and my 2 older sisters was put on the bus and sent to school. The bus would come right up to our driveway. Because we were the last house on that route, they'd come up to our driveway, pick us up, and turn around there and go back. Well, we went to school that day, and while we were in school, it started raining and storming again. And by the end of the day, it was flooding everywhere. It was absolutely horrible, and we'd already had a few days of rain and storms. And I remember the bus getting us to the bridge, and the bridge was overflowing. There was no way that bus could have went across that bridge, period. I mean, it would have washed the bus and every kid on their away. Well, me and my 2 sisters got off at Rice's house, and Mr. and Mrs. Rice, they were so nice. I mean, they were just really nice people. She took us in, she dried us off, she fed us dinner and everything, and of course no one could get across the bridge, so we couldn't get down there to let Mom and Dad know where we were at. When we didn't show up, Mom and Dad panicked, and Dad and Mom walked up to Mr. and Mrs. Koch's house up behind, and they called the school. The school got a hold of the bus driver, and the bus driver let them know where they let it off. Well, it was already after dark by this time, and Mom and Dad was panicking, and my Aunt Lola was there, and they were panicking. I mean, they had no idea where we were. You know, in that flooding, they were scared to death that we tried to cross that bridge and got caught in the flood. And anyway, Mr. and Mrs. Rice, they took good care of us. They dried us off, and they fed us dinner, and they even made pallets on their living room floor for us and put us to bed. And I remember 11 o'clock at night, I hear a knock on the door, and I remember Mr. and Mrs. Rice getting up, opening the door, and it was my dad and Mr. Koch. What had happened was they went up to Mr. and Mrs. Koch, called the school, and it took all this time to get a hold of the bus driver to find out where we were. And the bus driver had told him that he had let us off at the neighbor's house, so we were close to home, but he didn't realize we didn't have a phone and couldn't call our parents. And Mom and Dad was just livid. And I remember my dad just hugging all of us. And when they went up to Mr. and Mrs. Koch, and when nobody could tell them where we were until they got out of school, I remember Mom saying Mr. Koch jumped up and put his coat on and told my dad, said, "Let's go find your kids." And the creek, the way it ran before you got to the bridge down below, they had a fence that crossed the creek from one side to the other, so when the cattle went down in there, they couldn't walk the creek and get out on their side. So Mr. Koch and Dad had pulled some stakes up, or fence posts, and drove them in the ground, and they tightened that fence up as tight as they could get it, and they walked across that fence and came up to Mr. and Mrs. Rice, and that's where they found us. Well, Mr. Rice put us all in his truck and drove us down to the part where the fence was, where they were crossed, and he parked his truck there. Well, on the other side was my mom and my aunt, and they had their car parked on that side with the headlights shining on the end of the fence. And I remember as plain as day as my mom and my aunt standing there on the side of the river, and my mom just big as a barrel, and she just crying like a baby because they found us. And my God, that creek was rushing. I mean, it was rushing. It could have washed that bus completely away. And what they did was, my dad and Mr. Koch each had one of us to get on their backs and hang on for dear life. And they walked back across the fence and got us to the other side. I'll never forget it. I'll never forget riding on Mr. Koch's back, and I looking down and that rushing water just about pulling him completely off of that fence. And we get to the other side, and I remember my aunt yelling thank you to Mr. Rice, and he gets in his truck and goes home, and mom and dad put us in their car and we went home. We didn't go to school the rest of that week. Of course, it took that long for the water to go down, but there was no way that bus could have crossed that creek. It would have washed away and killed every kid on that bus. But I'll always be thankful to Mr. and Mrs. Rice. And you know, even at 7 years old, it's still just like a memory that happened yesterday, because it was so dramatic that it sticks in your mind. And it wasn't a month later, my youngest brother was born. And the place we lived, by the way, it was called Pumpkin Hollow. But it was in Bentonville, Arkansas. And needless to say, that summer, when everything cleared up, my mom and dad moved out there and we moved back toward town. But I'll never forget it. It's so vivid in my mind. It was just like being in a movie. And the scariest part was, of course, you know, as a 7-year-old kid, it was exciting. But the most scary part was hanging on to Mr. Koch's back and him walking that fence and the water just pushing that man. And all I remember is thinking that I was going to fall off and be washed away in the creek. I'd never seen water rushing so fast and so hard as that night. And it was still pouring down rain at that time. And my poor mom and aunt was sitting on the other side just waiting for us to get there. My mom was so panicked and so relieved and so grateful to Mr. and Mrs. Rice. And I went to school with their son, Ronnie Rice. He was in the same grade as me. But I'll always be grateful for them taking us in, knowing that mom and dad was worried about us, knowing that we couldn't get home. They knew where we lived, they just had no way of contacting them, but they took care of us. You know, Miss Rice kept telling us, don't worry, we'll get a hold of your mom in the morning. We can't do anything tonight. And I mean, she knew that mom was probably going out of her mind wondering where her kids were. But there wasn't anything Mr. and Mrs. Rice could do. But it was a time when neighbors came together and helped each other. Mr. and Mrs. Rice gave us a place to have dinner and warm and spend the night. And Mr. Koch, they had no kids of their own. And even before my dad could say anything, he was up putting his coat on, telling my dad, go get your wife and let's go find your kids. And he knew how they were going to have to get across that creek. And it was the only way to get to the other side. You couldn't even put a boat in there. It would have washed you away. I just think about how frantic my mother must have been to have 3 children missing and not know where they were. All this rain and flooding got me to thinking about that. Of course, I've never forgot it. It's just, it pops up every now and then. I don't know what I'm going to do about my yard if I can't get that lawnmower fixed. I'm hoping he can get it fixed and it doesn't cost a fortune to fix it, but I'm the last couple of weeks I have just felt like I'm at my wit's end, that I just can't do it anymore. That I just want to sit down, throw my hands up and say, that's it, forget it, I can't do this. But I know I have to keep pushing and keep going. And I know eventually, I'm not even all the way out of it yet, but I know that I'll get out of it. I need a haircut really bad. I haven't even had the energy to do that. Today's the first day that I've been fully out of bed all day long. I got up about 6 o'clock this morning and I've been out of bed since. Earlier this morning I sat and watched all the videos that I was behind on, and I mean, I haven't even been turning my TV or anything on. That's how bad it's been. Starting tomorrow, we have a severe thunderstorm coming in tomorrow, and it's supposed to last for 5 days. And then we'll have 2 days that are clear, and then we go back into storms again. But, you know, it's that time of year. The whole month of May around here is just severe lightning and thunderstorms, heavy rains, and tornadoes out the wahoo. And that's what I have to watch out the most. That's why I need to get out of this, so I will be aware when the tornadoes come. I realized that my last 2 videos, the views were horrible. Movie review I got, I think in a day and a half it had only hit like 18 views. And it's been on there for over a week now, and I think it just hit like 26 views. So even my views, everything is almost gone, and I'm starting to get really depressed about YouTube. But I do realize that once I'm back to being able to make videos every other day again and get them posted and keep them coming, that things will go back up. But it doesn't help, you know, my viewership going down. The last video I put on, the views were pretty bad. I mean, I look at other people's channels that has just about the same amount of people, and they'll get 30, 40 views in the first 4 or 5 hours. And mine, I'll get 4 views in 8 hours, and it'll be up to 20 views after the end of 1 full day or 2 days. But I can't let that kind of stuff get to me, because I have no intentions of shutting YouTube down. And of course, when I'm in this depressed mood, that's the only thing I think about is shut it down, let it go, quit worrying about it. People are not watching anymore. People don't care anymore. There is so many channels out there that yours doesn't even matter anymore. But yeah, you know, you have to realize with me being in a depression, that's just thoughts that go through your head. And I know better than that, but I'm not going to give up. You just have to give me a little time to get out of this, and it's going to happen every few months. You know, losing 34 pounds in a couple of weeks has really zapped my energy. You know, so I don't have a lot of energy. I'm still really tired all the time. Like before, I could sleep for 12 hours straight, and if I was awake more than an hour, I could be sitting in a chair and I'd start falling asleep again. It was horrible. And go to bed and sleep all night long. That's how I know when it's coming on, is when I can't stay awake for more than an hour, 2 hours at a time. I have to admit, this one was rough, but I'll be all right. Now I got to figure out what I'm going to do about my yard. This is horrible. You know, and I don't have the money to buy a new mower, and I don't have the money to have that one fixed. So I'm going to call somebody and see if, you know, and I can't afford to pay someone to come mow my yard. My yard has to be mowed every 2 weeks, or at least every week and a half. So I'm going to call a friend of mine and see if they have, I know he's got 2 or 3 mowers, and I'm going to see if he'll loan me his for this summer. And maybe by the end of summer I can afford to buy it from him. Guys, I will talk to you later, and hopefully you guys made it to the end of this video.